A truly good horror film will have you cowering behind a sofa pillow and praying for the sun to come up, whereas a bad horror film will have you reaching for the remote to see what else is on. However, every so often an inept horror film will have a secret ace up its sleeve. You know, that one genuinely terrifying scene that almost makes it worth sitting through. Almost. With that in mind, I'm Josh from Whatculture.com, and these are 10 genuinely terrifying scenes trapped in terrible horror movies. Number 10, Bob goes into the basement, the house by the cemetery. Depending on your tolerance for gory Italian horror, you may or may not feel that The House by the Cemetery is a particularly terrible film, but when judged on a pure filmmaking level, it certainly is lacking the usual kind of spark that one would associate with the Grandmaster of Gore, Lucio Fulci. The plot itself is fairly nonsensical and the characters are woefully underdeveloped, but it does have some potent atmosphere and genuinely hair-raising moments. Case in point, the scene in which the perpetually irritating Bob ventures into the titular house's basement after hearing the sounds of his babysitter Anne being brutally butchered. Once that initial shock of seeing Anne get her throat hacked open wears off, the scene manages to maintain a great deal of its suspense. Things only go from bad to worse though when Anne's head is flung down the stairs towards Bob, prompting him to flee only to get caught in the door. Things reach a fever pitch as the unseen killer makes their way up the stairs, and with this being an Italian horror film, anything is possible. Number 9, The Darkness Wrong Turn 2021. The most recent Wrong Turn installment certainly had some decent ideas, but they didn't quite coalesce into a truly amazing movie. Instead, the reboot shifted radically in a different direction from the admittedly stale original series, and brought with it a new, brutal tone. While the flick as a whole might not be totally recommendable though, this tone did result in some imaginatively gnarly kills and set pieces. From characters being surprisingly and brutally impaled to last-minute twists, there are some cool ideas in there, but none quite as haunting as the fate our heroes are sentenced to by the villains. That's because the characters are sentenced to darkness, a terrible fate worse than death, where they're violently blinded and then kicked into a pitch-black cave with other victims to live out the remainder of their days. Though most of our protagonists do escape this fate, we still see other people who have suffered it, transformed into more monster than man, devouring the flesh of anything they can get their hands on. It is truly awesome. Number 8, The Bathroom, The Night Flyer. It's safe to say that Stephen King adaptations are a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to both quality and scares. And one film that's definitely on the low end of both those spectrums is The Night Flyer. Adapted from the short story of the same name, this film sees a low-rent tabloid journalist, Richard Dees, investigate a string of murders that he believes to be the handiwork of Dwight Renfield, a vampire that travels via aeroplane. It's certainly a weird concept and one that doesn't quite translate to screen, but there's one scene in particular that does stand out from the rest. After finding the remnants of one of Renfield's massacres, Richard goes into a nearby bathroom to vomit. Upon emptying his guts into the sink though, he suddenly realizes that he's not alone. The atmosphere turns cold and nearby mirrors begin to crack as Renfield makes his presence known, softly creeping up behind Richard, who was of course unable to see him due to vampires not casting reflections in mirrors. It's a well-directed and genuinely spooky scene that is sadly located in what is yet another below-average Stephen King flick. Number 7, The Laundry Chute, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. By the time Halloween 5 rolled around, the franchise was suffering from chronic fatigue. Rushed into production immediately after the fourth installment hit big at the box office, this film's production was unsurprisingly troubled, and it really does show in the end product. Its one saving grace though is the laundry chute scene. During the film's climax, young Jamie Lloyd is pursued through the Myers house by her murderous uncle. Being the headstrong final girl that she is though, Jamie hides inside the laundry chute, but Michael is quick to catch on to her hiding spot and begins stabbing through the metal in an attempt to get her. It's a surprisingly effective and genuinely intense scene though, made all the more nerve-shredding by Danielle Harris's petrified performance and the sheer ferocity in which Michael attempts to get her. Naturally, we all knew that she would get out alive in the end, but for a good minute or two there, the film really does have you thinking that Michael will succeed in killing his niece. Number 6, no happy endings, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre series has seen plenty of low points over the years, but none quite as bad as Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. This prequel to the surprisingly solid remake, The Beginning is turgid from beginning to end. Oi oi. It's a truly lifeless, ugly movie that mistakes entertainment and horror for just pure nastiness. The worst crime it makes, though, is in making Leatherface himself boring, attempting to give him some kind of backstory about him and the rest of his family losing their jobs and then turning to killing and cannibalism. The victims don't fare much better, being the kind of one-dimensional cutouts the horror genre turns out on a regular basis. Which makes it all the more surprising then that The Beginning's ending actually is pretty damn good. We pick up with our final girl who's commandeered a car and looks like she's off to safety. Then, out of nowhere, old Leatherface pops up in the back seat and brutally impales her with a chainsaw in a completely OTT way. Number 5, The Spider Lady: Spookies. Most of the time, cult classic horror films tend to err more on the side of campy thrills than outright scares, and Spookies is certainly no different. Both beloved and reviled for its overt ridiculousness and the nonsensical plot that sees a group of people being besieged by zombies, the Grim Reaper, and many other nightmarish creatures, this is a great film to bring to a bad movie night. Although, if there are any arachnophobes in your little cinema club, then you may just send them running for the hills. And that's because one of the characters finds themselves separated from the group and stumbles into a dark cave adorned with giant spider webs, where he's quickly greeted by a woman who speaks cryptically to him about this being her prison. All the while, an extra large spider begins making its way up his back. The spider quickly attacks and sends the man careening into a nearby web where he becomes ensnared. All the while, the lady begins to transform into a monstrous giant spider and then proceeds to devour him. Even in spite of its ropey special effects and am-dram quality acting, it is a scene that is still capable of making you squirm due to just how unpleasant and gross the whole thing is. Number 4, the final level, Doom Annihilation. It's no secret that a lot of video game movies just blow. The thing about Doom Annihilation, though, is that it makes all of those misfires look like Citizen Kane in comparison. This second adaptation of the popular FPS franchise is a direct-to-video stinker that attempts to be somewhat more faithful to the games, but just ends up missing the mark with every element. To say that this thing looks cheap would be a total understatement. Now, if you will, imagine the blandest sci-fi Amazon Prime show that you can think of, and then subtract around 95% of the budget, and you'll be partway there in understanding just how low the production quality is across the board here. Still, it's likely the production only spent a $5 on these sets because they were saving up for the bombastic finale, which does offer the kind of B-movie thrills that everyone expected in the first place. As our hero Joan is teleported to hell, she faces off against the demon hordes, BFG in hand. It looks a bit like a fan film, sure, but given the budget, it is genuinely impressive, and offers a taste of what the rest of the flick could have been. Number 3, the news broadcast Signs. Now, I know some of you out there may scoff at this being included, but taken as a whole, in my opinion, Signs is a fairly mundane sci-fi horror film that isn't really all that good. But while sure the jury may be out on its actual quality, we can all agree that there is one truly harrowing moment in there. And that's because partway through the film, one of our protagonists, Meryl, catches a news broadcast on TV that relates to the ongoing threat of alien invasion. The anchor reports that the footage they're about to show is highly disturbing and that we should definitely heed their warning. Filmed during a children's birthday party in Brazil, we're shown that the attendees are in a state of panic and have flocked to the windows in order to catch a glimpse of something outside. The suspense builds to a beautiful crescendo in which an alien quickly steps out from concealment before disappearing off-screen once again, sending both the partygoers and the audience into a flood of hysterics. It's one of those short, sharp shocks that will stay with you for years to come, and it's genuinely really well executed. Number 2, Did You Check on the Children? When a Stranger Calls. The opening scene to When a Stranger Calls is one of the genre's most influential and downright terrifying set pieces. Based upon the popular urban legend The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, the scene starts with our protagonist, Jill Johnson, settling in for an easy night of babysitting. Before long though, she's subjected to a series of disturbing phone calls in which an unknown caller asks her if she's checked on the children. She initially just brushes it off as a prank, but soon begins to question if she's truly alone in the house. Stretched out over a nerve-shredding 20 minutes, this scene is legendary for all the right reasons. However, once the film jumps ahead 7 years, it does lose all of its edge and just becomes a rather mundane thriller that never recaptures that same illicit fear. Number 1. The Clown Statue Amusement. A film that came and went in the blink of an eye, Amusement is a 2008 anthology horror film that had big ideas but ultimately fell flat on its face. The film focuses on 3 young women and their encounters with a deranged serial killer who swore revenge on them after they bullied him as a kid. For the most part, the film is pretty lackluster, but one sequence is permanently etched into the minds of those that have been able to sit through it. Taking heavy inspiration from a famous urban legend, this scene sees babysitter Tabitha having to spend the night in her aunt's spare bedroom, one that just so happens to be the home to a collection of clown dolls, the centerpiece of which is a life-size clown doll that's slumped in a rocking chair because of course it is. I mean, why put it anywhere that isn't spooky, I guess? Tabitha is understandably then creeped out by the overly large doll and asks her aunt if she's okay to move it or at least put a sheet over it. The phone suddenly goes silent though for a moment before her aunt reveals that they don't own a life-size clown doll. We shan't spoil the rest of it here, but it is a genuinely chilling sequence that almost makes up for the rest of the film's shortcomings. Almost. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What did you think of these scenes, and are there any other bad movies that have great sequences inside of them? While you're down there as well, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to Whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.